Barbara Ehrenreich is a journalist, author, and activist who has written extensively on healthcare, women's rights, and economic justice. She is the New York Times bestselling author of several notable works, including Nickel and Dimed, which chronicles her attempts to survive on minimum wage to highlight the struggles of the working poor. Her most recent book, Bright-Sided: How the Relentless Promotion of Positive Thinking Has Undermined America, examines how an irrational optimism and the refusal to consider negative outcomes results in disaster on a national scale. Ms. Ehrenreich is also a contributor to the New York Times, Harper's, and Time magazine. And without further ado, please help me welcome Barbara Ehrenreich.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Very glad to be back in Iowa again. Back in Iowa City, this is the second time, though I've been told tonight it was actually 20 years ago when I was last here, you know, before the invention of Starbucks or sushi, and it's a different town. But I want to thank you, the lecture committee, and everybody else for your wonderful hospitality so far, and show you my present that I just received. Very proud of this. How many of you are students? Not a lot, okay. Because I do want to address some things, particularly the students. I don't want to talk about politics too much tonight, because for one thing, you know, I'm not sure college students are allowed to vote anymore. Are you? I don't know. Within the last couple of years, the Republicans have introduced legislation in dozens of states to tighten voter ID rules so that college students wouldn't be able to vote. You know, I used to think of college students as kind of a privileged group in society. That's changed pretty rapidly. So you're sort of an oppressed minority now. But yeah, maybe you shouldn't vote. I mean, after all, you're not allowed to drink alcohol if you're underage. And if you're going to get through some of the political rhetoric this season, you need a good stiff drink now and then. You all know about Romney's secretly recorded remarks at a fundraiser in Boca Raton, where he said that 47% of Americans, he said that 47% don't pay income tax. He wasn't counting himself even. They think of themselves as victims and are financially dependent on government. You know, I didn't take this too well. As one of those Americans who does, I get Medicare. You know, most of us actually have some kind of connection to government, even like if we use the highways or something. You know, my feeling was, Romney, if you think almost half of Americans are parasitical scum, no offense taken. We think the same of you. Now, but this is a strictly nonpartisan discussion here tonight. So I want to talk about a subject that neither candidate likes to talk about very much at all, or we seldom hear the word, and that is poverty. I have to give a little bit of background about why, you know, I concentrate so much on that issue. And I could go all the way back to childhood, but I wouldn't. I'd just say that start in the 70s. I was a single mother of 2 small children trying to make a living doing freelance writing and part-time work jobs. We were above the poverty level officially, but we were having a hard time. The big thing I remember is when I would drive my son, who was around like 12 or 13 at that age, to a friend's house, I'd have to let him out a block before we came to his friend's house so nobody could see my car. This young man, he's straightened out quite a bit since then. Anyway, you know, because of those years, perhaps, but also because of other things in my childhood, I get really, really upset when I hear people speak disrespectfully about people in poverty. maybe especially women in poverty. And, you know, in the 1990s, I was certainly hearing a lot of disrespect, especially from the politicians and pundits. The line was, there's something wrong with poor people. Nothing wrong with the economic system, there's something wrong with poor people. They have low IQs. They have character defects. They make bad lifestyle decisions. They are promiscuous. They are lazy. They eat too many Doritos and drink too much Mountain Dew. I think this is familiar to most of you because, you know, there's a recent poll done by the Salvation Army, and I don't usually rely on military intelligence, but here it is. They did a poll, which is published in the spring. It found that 43% of Americans agreed that if poor people want a job, they can get a job. 27% people said that people who are poor because they are lazy, 27%, and 29% said the problem with poor people is that they have low moral values. That's a lot of people going around with those attitudes. The theory, in other words, is that if anybody is poor in America, they've got only themselves to blame. And this is why the original welfare reform bill, which was passed in 1996, the bill that ended the entitlement that single parents used to have to some support to raise their children with, that was ended. And the interesting thing to me is that bill provided within it $100 million for chastity education for low-income women. See the promiscuity thing, so you got to train them to be chaste. This bill was signed in 1996 by Bill Clinton. And I just want you to think about that for a moment. Bill Clinton signing into law this requirement for chastity education, not unfortunately for himself. Now, I never thought that these lifestyle explanations of poverty made any sense. I could look at my local newspaper and see what the apartment rents were, and then also see what the wages were being offered by local employer. The math did not look good to me. And I made this point so many times that finally a magazine editor challenged me as a journalist to go out and try doing the, quote, old-fashioned kind of journalism and try to live on those wages myself. I did not think this was such a good idea, but, you know, you get an assignment and you're a freelance writer, that's what you do. So I had to leave home, find the cheapest accommodations I could, and the best paying jobs I could. I want to underscore this, for anybody ever read Nickel and Dimed? All right, thank you. You know, those are not minimum wage jobs. I did better than minimum wage. I did not look for the lowest paying jobs by any means at all. I mean, I had a strict rule that I could not use my own credentials, such as they are, to try to get a job, but that wouldn't have gotten me anywhere anyway, I must admit. I never saw a help wanted ad for a political essayist. I, in particular, never saw a help wanted ad for a sarcastic feminist political essayist. The jobs I got, waitress, you know, hotel housekeeper, nursing home aide, Walmart associate, et cetera, that's really where I fit in the paid workforce. Now, so I wrote about this in Nickel and Dimed, and now I look back on that experience and see things that I perhaps did not see so clearly at the time. And one of those things that really is clear to me now, and it was sort of, I kind of knew, but I couldn't express it at the time, was that if you're in a low-wage workforce, there is a suspicion that you are some sort of criminal, that you have criminal tendencies, right from the get-go. First, you have to take a drug test to get the job. Anybody here ever take a drug test to get a job? Wow, how'd you do? That's I mean, ask me if you want to get into the discussion about how useless those drug tests are, in addition to being humiliating, and a way of saying to you, we own you now, including your time on the weekends, whatever, we own you. Then you have to take a personality test, very revealing, these personality tests. Some people have had personality tests too, yeah. This is for really low-wage jobs now. A lot of the questions are pretty easy. Here is a sample that I was able to actually write down because I had a pencil and paper with me. And this appears in more than one company's test. Quote, in the last year, I have stolen, parentheses, check dollar amount below, worth of goods from my employers, close quote. You know, I should have said, gee, could I borrow a calculator? Or this test, which popped up on more than one company's test, agree or disagree, it is easier to work when you're a little bit high. You don't want to think too much about that question. Get in trouble. Now, all these jobs I had were very, very hard. They were physically hard. I knew they would be. But I would say that there's one argument for sometimes doing this kind of journalism, which is called immersion journalism, where you go right in physically into the situation. I would not have known how hard they were unless I tried them myself. I mean, it's one thing to interview somebody and she says, yeah, it's pretty tiring. It's another thing to be a strong person and find that your legs are like Jell-O at the end of a shift, which I often found. But what's more of a surprise to me, and it stands out in my memory more and more, is that these jobs were also mentally challenging for me. And that's a very humbling discovery for somebody who has a PhD, who's published books and everything. I had a hard time learning everything. I would just give you one example. It was Walmart. I was assigned to ladies' wear. I thought, great, I'll be giving fashion advice, be fun. Well, that's not what you do if you're a Walmart associate, as we're called. My job was to pick up things that people had, tried on and then rejected, or that they had thrown on the floor. Or there's this other thing that goes on in big box stores that I have to mention, in case any of you shop in them. What is this business of going over to the lawn and garden department and getting something like a hose attachment and hiding it in the Bobby Brooks ladies' casual wear? Is that fun? Get something out of that? Because somebody has to put everything back and find the place for it. Now, the point here is that I had to memorize the exact locations of hundreds of different items, which would then be rotated every few days around the department for no other purpose than to convince me that I have Alzheimer's disease. I mean, I don't know. So, very big lesson, which just has resounded in my mind ever since. I never use the word unskilled to describe anybody's job. Every job takes intelligence and skill and concentration and deserves our full respect. And if there's any job you're thinking, oh no, that couldn't be, try it. Try it for a few days. Now, I want to add that a lot of these jobs were much harder than they needed to be. Many strange management rules you encounter in the low-wage workplace. Rules like no talking to your fellow employees. You know what that's about. No complaining or organizing. No drinking water. I don't know why. The whole bathroom break situation. I was naive enough to think that bathroom breaks are a human right, considering that they are a human need. But there were some jobs I worked in which they were so infrequent that I started looking back on that drug test with nostalgia. They don't tell you that could be your last chance. Actually, there's a professor, his name escapes my mind right now, at the law school at University of Iowa, right here, who wrote a book, an academic study. Is he here? Where is he? Barclay? Oh, yes, who did a wonderful study on bathroom breaks in American workplaces. And the title of this book tells it all. It's called Void Where Prohibited. Now, if he's around, please, I hope I meet him afterwards. You know, another thing that reflecting on this really strikes me is that despite the constant suspicions that you are going to steal something in your jobs, you know, a packet of jelly or something like that, management itself was usually doing the stealing. And you know, there's so many examples I could give. I'll just give you, again, the example of Walmart. At the time when I worked there, and as near as I could tell from talking to Walmart associates today, some of this still goes on. But a supervisor could come over to you and say, go punch out. I've got a lot of work for you. Now think about that. That means the paid part of your day is over. From now on, you're volunteering for the next few hours. And it goes on in so many ways. I mean, they may tell you to get to work, like in the house cleaning job I had, they may tell you to get to work 45 minutes earlier than the clock will start running. That's free, you know. You're just there, you're just helping out at that point. This, you know, is a huge problem in America. Recent studies suggest, and this is just an estimate, but that the amount of workers' wages stolen annually by their employers is about $106 billion a year. $106 billion. Now that's on the order of it's major social programs like unemployment insurance, but it's bigger than that. Well, I survived the work. I was not so good at making ends meet. The problem was rent. And what I discovered was that rents were much higher than I had expected, and I, of course, was looking at the cheapest possible kinds of places, like I stayed in trailer parks, you know, things like that. I found a lot of people, though, go into residential motels. And that's because if you don't have, it takes money to get an apartment. You can have the first month's rent and a security deposit. Maybe they'll even do a credit check. So if you don't have if you're not going to get by those barriers, which can be well over $1,000, of course, then you can go into a residential motel, have a roof over your head immediately. The last one I stayed in was probably the worst dump of a motel I've ever stayed in. The room smelled like rodent droppings. There was eerily enough no shade of any kind on the window, although this was parking lot level. Meaning, you know, once it was dark, you had your lights out, or you had no privacy. Anyway, it was really kind of creepy. I felt very sorry for myself in this place until I began to figure out that I was living in relative luxury because every other room was occupied by a family. See, that one queen-size bed then is your dining room table. It's your desk, it's your workspace. And I had this whole room to myself. Now, I learned a big lesson from this that I keep running into again and again. It is expensive to be poor. It's expensive to stay in one of these residential motels. The one I am describing costs $250 a week, which was more than I was earning at Walmart. And I had not yet been able to get a second job. Or like the one I'm talking about, no fridge or microwave in your room. What does that mean? That means everything you eat comes from a convenience store, or maybe, you know, dining more upscale from fast food. But I'm not complaining about the cuisine here. I'm just saying that's expensive. When you can't store things overnight, when you can't heat things up, it's going to cost more, or, you know, you're going to, you know, eat very, very badly. So, there are real obstacles. I had to admit, I can't do it with the rents I was facing. I would have to get married to a rich guy. I'd have to, pile in with a bunch of roommates. I'd have to figure something out. But I couldn't, I could not make it with my own little room to live in. And I didn't even have any children with me to support and as well as take care of. I tried to get my kids to come with me, but, certain age. Anyway, I have no idea how anybody would live on these wages with children. And let's just talk about the math here for a second. Minimum wage in Iowa is $7.25 an hour, which gives you $1,160 a month, $1,160 a month. Let's throw in $100 worth of food stamps and say, which is actually about the average monthly benefit. So now you have $1,260 a month. Rent and utilities, probably in the neighborhood of $600 a month. Is that too far off for this area? I mean, that's okay. I mean, child care for one child. Suppose one of your children, you have one child who have to have child care. If you were to go for a facility, as opposed to grandma or something like that, it would be, even for an unlicensed facility, about $500 a month. That leaves you with $160 a month for transportation, for medical care, for clothing, and for anything else you might need. It's not doable. This is not ideology. This is arithmetic. Sometimes better off or more affluent people have asked me, why don't those people just learn to manage their money a little better? The answer is, if you are earning about $7 an hour, that was what I was averaging, $8 an hour, $9 an hour today, which is about the equivalent of $7 an hour in 2000. If you have that kind of income, there's only one financial plan for you, and it's called no. You can't have it. Don't buy it. Don't drink it. Don't smoke it. Don't fix it. Don't fill a prescription. Don't go to a doctor in the first place. It's just, that's it. That's all the discussion we need about financial planning. Now, it certainly worked alongside some people who were not getting by at all. Homeless workers, for example, who, because they had an automobile to sleep in, did not consider themselves homeless. They're a step above that today. Hungry people. That goes against a lot. We have stereotypes about poor people being obese, and there's a reason for that, obesity, a nutritional reason. But also there are a lot of poor people who just do not even get enough calories a day because they're running around being waitresses or picking things up or stocking shelves. Anyway, all that was from before the economic downturn that began in 2008. Before unemployment shot up and jobs got so hard today. If you read my book, Nickel and Dime Today, I just would tell you, remember, those were the good old days. That's when things were going well. So a lot of my work since has been about what is happening to that same population in these harder times. Well, you know that the number of people in poverty has grown now to be about 16% of the population, which is 146 million, I think. Help me with the math there. And if you count the so-called near poor, people making, the official poverty level is about $22,000 a year for a family of four. To get the number of people who are really struggling, you have to sort of double that. Say, number of families that are making less than $44,000 a year. So these, more people are poor. Many more people are poor. And remember, when we talk about the poor today, we are not talking just about sort of the people who are stereotypically poor, low-wage workers or single mothers or, people whose parents and grandparents were also poor, we're talking about 14 million people who are unemployed, many of them having college degrees and professional credentials. I know I shouldn't say this, I don't want to discourage anybody, but, you get out of here, no matter how hard you work, it'll have nothing to do with how smart you are, how hard you worked, whether there are jobs for you in the end. And then that's something that just has to be faced. So I think it's time to consider an alternative theory of poverty, and that is that poverty is not a character failing or a wrong-headed lifestyle. I propose that poverty is a shortage of money. That's my new theory. And the big reason for it is that pay is inadequate or you have no job. So I'm not going to talk boringly enough about all the things that could be done if we wanted to have, a successful anti-poverty program in this country to widen the gap narrow the gap between rich and poor and lift up so many people who are at the bottom. You know what that would involve: affordable housing, subsidized child care, many, many things like that. But I think I want to emphasize something sad, really sad. Not what we don't do for the poor, but what we do to the poor. And that is that instead of helping the down and out in this culture, we have a society that seems to persecute the poor. So that if you start sliding down, you're likely to accelerate all the way down to destitution, homelessness, even incarceration. I'll give you some examples of this. And this is both government and corporations I'm talking about, who will stamp on those fingers of people who are trying to claw their way up. A growing number of employers openly discriminate against unemployed people. That sounds weird if you think about it. Who else are you going to hire, right? Someone who needs a job? No. There have been help wanted ads that has said explicitly in the last couple of years, no unemployed candidates will be considered at all, which comes from the theory that if you're unemployed, you're a loser. So who wants you? So that adds to the burden. Here's another thing. 60% of employers now do a credit check before offering you a job. Now, of course, you're going to have a lousy credit rating if you have been unemployed for a while or if you've been poor. Yes, you'll probably end up relying more and more on credit cards. If you are poor, the rates go up. When you apply for a credit card, you get a subprime credit card. You build up bills. And if you think you can get out of all your bills through bankruptcy, which certainly occurs to a lot of people, I just want to point out that the average cost in this country of filing for bankruptcy is $2,000. If you don't have money, you don't have that $2,000. Maybe we need a special government program to help with that. Anyway, government contributes its own forms of harassment of people in poverty through, the law enforcement system. There are about 10 million people every year in this country are charged with misdemeanors. Most of them very minor misdemeanors, but still leading to fines and to jail time. 75% of people charged with misdemeanors are poor or even indigent, no money. And the average fine for misdemeanors, which I cannot pin down any better than this, unfortunately, is somewhere between $200 and $500 a shot. So it's very easy to start getting deeper and deeper into trouble. Example, in New York City, and there are more crimes too. Number of crimes you can commit keeps expanding. In New York City, it's illegal now to put your feet up on a subway car seat, even if there's nobody else in the subway car. Even if it's 3 a.m. and you're riding back from your restaurant dishwasher job and you're falling asleep, you don't just get warned by the police, you get arrested for having your feet up on a subway car seat. Arrested. You know what that means? I mean, of course, it's inconvenient, and it could mean some kind of a jail stay, but it also definitely means fines, and then when you don't pay those on time, interest on those fines, and the possibility of being rearrested, seriously arrested now, because there'll be a warrant out for you. Another thing, and this example drives me crazy, it's so loony. A growing number of cities in this country have criminalized truancy. They will arrest and even handcuff children found on the street during school hours. In Los Angeles, the fine for truancy is $250. In Dallas, it can be as high as $500. And you know, in LA, it's not kids in Beverly Hills who are being harassed for being on the street. This is about the overwhelming part of the student population, which is from poor Latino households. $250 is a lot of money. Actually, it's interesting that they found out in LA that one reason children miss school or are late or are on the street is that they have to rely on city buses to get them to school. The city bus system is underfinanced. The buses are overfilled. The bus might go right by your stop without picking you up. So there you are, a kid loose in school hours. Now, this kind of harassment, by the way, of the poor over these sorts of offenses has actually increased since the economic downturn. And that's what really caught my attention. There seems to be a fairly simple reason for that. Counties and municipalities have seen their incomes decline from their tax base, and so they increasingly rely on fees and fines to supplement their declining revenues. Now, what happens if you can't pay a fine? Well, very likely you go to jail. There's a case, this is from last January, of a South Carolina woman whose business was destroyed by the recession. She was trying to support herself by selling plasma, her own blood, and scrap metal. In January, she was charged with having a, quote, messy yard, and fined $480 for that crime of having a messy yard. I didn't know that was a crime, but I'm pretty vulnerable there. Because she could not pay that $480, she was jailed for 6 days. At least she was not charged for her room and board while she was in jail. And if that sounds bizarre, that's what I thought too. But here's another, the sort of this is beyond catch-22. And you're probably in jail because you had no money. And so you let something go, you had a broken tail light or something like that, and you got caught. Now you're going to get out of jail with no job, a diminished chance of ever getting a job, possibly no home, and a big bill for the accommodations that you have been using. Now suppose you get all the way down to homelessness, actually living on the streets. Next thing you find is it is practically illegal to be homeless in America. At least anything you might want to do, like sit or lie down or sleep, God forbid you should want to urinate, those are all illegal in most cities or towns. You can't do this. There are a couple of fights going on in different places. I just know this from activists. One is Burlington, Vermont. Another is actually Berkeley, California, which I think of, we always think of as a liberal place, a fight against a new ordinance that will prevent sitting on a sidewalk. Now, who's that aimed at? People who don't have chairs. I interviewed a homeless man last year in D.C. who had been arrested because of an outstanding warrant. During a warrant search by the police, they came inside a Washington, D.C. homeless shelter. So there he is. He thinks he's safe. He's got a bunk for the night, in a homeless shelter. The lights get switched on at 2 or 3 in the morning. Cops rush in. They identify him as a person who has an outstanding warrant out for him. And what was the prior crime? Sleeping on a sidewalk. In other words, he was arrested inside a homeless shelter for the crime of being homeless. Go figure. And this is something that, occupiers discovered in the Occupy encampments last fall. But homeless people have known all along that, you cannot be out in public taking care of yourself in any way. Their laws vary all over the place. I love this one from Sarasota, Florida, which makes it illegal to build a latrine outdoors. Well, all right, don't build latrines. Build a fire to cook. Can't do any of those things. It is also illegal in Sarasota, and I'm going to read the quote here, to be asleep and, quote, when awakened, state that you have no other place to live. I mean, it'd be all right to be, say, I'm taking a break from my penthouse condo by sleeping here on the street tonight. But to say, no, hey, I'm homeless, that's it. In other words, it's illegal to be homeless for almost any reason, although there are no laws, obviously, that require cities to provide food or shelter or public restrooms or any of those things for their indigent citizens. In some cities, like Orlando, but many others, it is also illegal to help the poor in public. There are laws forbidding the sharing of food with indigent people in public places. I mean, you could share food with your friend if you're well enough dressed or something, but if you were to walk into a park and find a person who was, quote, indigent by the standards of the police, you risk jail time for sharing. And people have gone to jail for that again and again. I don't know what they think. They are Christians, just sharing food with the hungry. But anyway, you see there's a pattern here. There has been a pattern for a number of years in America of defunding services that might help people who are having trouble while ramping up law enforcement against them. So you starve school budgets and public transportation budgets and then make it a crime to be a truant, to be out of school. It would shut down public housing and end so many federal subsidies for housing and then make it a crime to be homeless. All of these sorts of things, it defies my imagination. I mean, it's beyond just not helping. I used to always end a talk like this by talking about all the things we could do that would make things better, affordable housing. It's a bad situation when the same number of people reside in the prisons in the United States as reside in what limited public housing we have. It's really, you could say that the penitentiary system has become our largest public housing project. There's a lot of things you could do. You could raise the minimum wage, and you could cut executive compensation at the top. We've gotten some limited health reform. How about another step? Why not mandate that people can get paid sick days and never get fired for staying home because you're sick or because your child is sick, which is what happens routinely now. We also need a real investment in higher education. No one should have to work full-time while going through college or getting their education. That is impossible. And everywhere I travel, any campus I have ever talked to, spoken at, somebody is going to come up to me afterwards and say, I have 3 children, I'm a single mom, I'm going to school. This just happened to me 2 weeks ago in a community college in Dallas. She said, actually, she had 4 children, single mom, going to school full-time, and I looked at her, I said, when do you sleep? And she said, well, usually between 3 and 5 in the morning. I said, this is not a plan. This is not a good plan. You destroy your health, and the whole thing falls apart. Now, the trouble is she'll probably flunk out of school at some point, because it's impossible, right? And then she'll blame herself. She'll think, I wasn't smart enough. No, I said, never blame yourself. You were put in a situation where you had to fail. And the only way to get out of this is, come together and demand that higher education be a right. No one, anyway, should have to graduate with tens of thousands of dollars in debt. So I think college students are practically a new oppressed minority. Not only is it dicey whether you'll get to vote, but you are basically being trained to be debtors. Now, I have not, stopped wanting to see change on all those fronts, but I've sort of changed in what I emphasize. If nobody wants to talk in this realm, in this era of extreme anti-government, Tea Party type of politics, I don't want to push all that. I want to say instead, if we cannot get around to those measures that civilized countries have already accomplished, could we at least stop the meanness? Could we at least stop persecuting people who are having a hard time? And I don't think that's asking too much. Stop wage theft by employers. Right there. Everybody gets a raise. Stop treating low-wage workers as criminals in so many ways. Give them rights in the workplace so they can organize into unions if they should want to do that. Stop penalizing people for their credit scores. In this country, we act as if the credit score was a measure of your personal value, your worth as a human being. No, just stop that. That should not be the basis for getting a place to live or a job. Stop harassing the homeless and the indigent in public places. In other words, stop kicking people when they're down. My simple program, my demand. And I'd say this is not about being a Democrat or Republican, or a liberal or conservative, or even a Christian or a member of some other faith. This is about the fundamental morality of a society. I know there are people who think that the only real moral issues are abortion or gay rights or stem cells or something. And I'm not going to argue whether those are moral issues. We could argue about it. But poverty is also a moral issue. Suffering, unnecessary, humanly imposed suffering is a moral issue. And if you're looking for biblical backup, you won't find a single reference in the Bible to abortion or to gay marriage or even to stem cell research, surprisingly. But you will find over 3,000 references to our moral responsibility to those who are in trouble, who are suffering, who are poor. I'm not a religious person. I can see that. I think it's time to act on that biblical imperative, which is for me a moral imperative, to reach out a hand to those who are hurting and at least stop kicking people where they're down. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, we have some, thank you very much. We have some time for questions and comments, and I would also invite anybody now who is here who knows of some project that people should be involved with locally or on campus that addresses these issues. Here's an audience. Here's your chance to advertise. So questions and answers are welcome. And the microphone is in the middle of the room so everybody can hear you.
Hi. Here in Johnson County, we're about to have a referendum to build a new 240-bed jail, basically to enable the process of mass incarceration here in Johnson County.
Wait, you speaking did a little muffled to me.
I'm talking about there's a referendum to build a new 240-bed jail in Johnson County. This seems to me to enable the endless cycle of mass incarceration in America. This also seems to kind of play right into the endless cycle of poverty and despair and basically getting people so dug in that they can never dig out. And as one sheriff told me, you know, you build a jail to fill it. Do you have any comments about that?
No, I think you said it very well. Is there any effort to stop this? You know,
You're looking at him.
And how do people find out about it as it develops?
Just do a Facebook search on Johnson County Jail.
Johnson County Jails, okay. All right, no, that's a.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. That's a good point. And I should point out that, you know, another way that municipalities and counties and prison authorities save money in these hard, lean times is by cutting back on not just services. I mean, if you think being in prison is like a big, you know, you're all constantly at a gym or something, cutting back on meals to 2 meals a day. So that's very disturbing right there. Yeah.
Hi, I'm wondering what you think about the possibility of the advent of automation, removing the class of jobs for what employers would consider disposable employees, like shelf stacking, could be easily done by a robot in the next 5 years. So what kind of impact do you think this will have on people who are trying to get their leg up?
Very interesting question. It is surprising how many ways the sort of low-wage, quote, service sector jobs have been automated. Like even in fast food, sometimes when you place your order, and you know, or a voice comes out when you're in your car and asks for your order, takes it down, that voice may be coming from another country. You know, that they can find somebody cheaper. One thing that holds back that kind of automation is that you can get human workers so cheaply in these areas. But this is something we have to face. You cannot just say, and I've heard many liberal intellectuals and you know, good people even say, well, that's why everybody has to have an education, because everybody, you know, we have to be, you know, ready for whatever the new challenges are, because the old jobs will go away. Yeah, but don't have that education cost them $50,000 or $100,000 and then end in no job. We have not figured out what kind of an economy we want to have. I personally think let's automate all kinds of things. There, you know, might be things that people don't want to do. Maybe a lot of people who are stocking shelves right now would rather be philosophers or astronomers. Let them study. Let them do that. But then we have to think about what kind of economy will support that. And it's not, I'll tell you this much, an economy where you have a class of super rich people who have hundreds of millions or billions of dollars, while so many of the rest of us, are struggling to get by.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you so much for telling the truth about poverty. I thought I'd ask you first how you felt about the Democratic National Convention, and particularly Bill Clinton sort of being heralded as this progressive counter to the Republicans when he was in fact a man who worked with the Republicans precisely to undo and eliminate the entitlement to public family cash assistance in this country, A, and B, also worked with the Republicans to introduce some of the key financial deregulations that led to the Great Recession, the collapse in 2007 and 2008. The New York Times did a piece, you may have seen it, where they did a word analysis of the words that were used at both of the conventions. You know, they got a hold, I guess they got a hold of every single speech that was given, and they did a word analysis of words per 25,000. And poverty didn't even register in the search. It didn't even happen. I kind of did a little research myself and determined that it actually, Romney actually made a direct reference in his speech to 1 in 6 Americans being poor. There are no direct references at all in either Clinton's speech or Michelle Obama's speech or Barack Obama's speech. It's very troubling. I was curious what you think of that. And another thing that's completely missing from both of the conventions was actually probably the leading existential challenge to humanity right now, which is the climate crisis and ecocide and the environmental crisis. It's just off the table, almost completely, in both the conventions. What about the old Van Jones idea? I mean, I guess I'm thinking about solutions. What about green-collar jobs and putting literally millions of people to well-paid, to good-paid work, even in the inner cities, retrofitting inner city buildings and factories and building wind turbines? Isn't that sort of the ultimate twofer? I mean, isn't that really what we need to be talking about when you talk about an alternative economy, is a new ecological green economy? Isn't that the solution in many ways to much of this? Thank you.
Well, do you watch the conventions?
I watched as much as I could stand of them, yeah. Yeah.
Good for you. I'm glad somebody did. I mean, they're very expensive to produce. You know, I can't go there. I did not watch them. I want nothing to do with that. I mean, the idea that they are just shows, that they are infomercials, I don't care. I'm not going to watch the Democrats or the Republicans. I've actually been to conventions, as more as a reporter, and when there was a little more life to them, but there is none. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that to say it is heartbreaking. It is heartbreaking that the Democrats cannot talk about poverty and economic hardship. And this is a weird reversal where we have the party of the rich who brings up poverty and economic hardship now and then in their fight against the other party that somewhat more represents the majority of people. The irony is it's painful. But thank you for your observations.
Hi, I have a question about optimism, so maybe relating nickel and dime to bright-sided. So I'm supposed to be a success story. So I was a foster kid, teen mom, didn't graduate high school, fought my way to the PhD, and, no one wants to talk about, okay, now you're done, and you have all this loan debt, and these kids still, and a job that you're supposed to be so grateful for at this wonderful university that, 37 grand a year, four people in the family, and then what do you do? And when you talk about it, or when I talk about it, what I hear is you should be grateful.
No.
And you are a success story. Really? Because I have a whole hell of a lot of debt, and nobody wants to admit that struggle to the top, supposedly in terms of a degree, was really a big waste of time.
Well, I think you're right. That's a good point. I have a journalism project I started, actually, and I'm working on it, where we try to increase the coverage of the kinds of issues I was talking about tonight. And one of our journalists recently did a fascinating story about what goes on in welfare to work job readiness training programs. You have to go through this, quote, job readiness training if you or to accept this public assistance. And what goes on in them is it's all about positive thinking. You should have a good attitude. What's the matter with your attitude? If you're poor, you have a bad attitude. Yeah, you got a job, you should be grateful for it. You should really be, you should never criticize. I'm sorry, but this is the kind of thing that also Oprah and others have peddled for a long time. An attitude of gratitude, Instead of saying, this sucks, I won't do this, you're supposed to say, oh, thank you for whatever you give to me. And we've got to combat that. That's about keeping people down.
Hi. You talked about earlier about how we shouldn't be as mean to poor people and stuff, and I wonder how easy that is for people to have a public conversation about poverty when most of the time when there's this discussion about poor people and poverty, it's often characterized and they're often made into characters about welfare queens and all these other sorts of things. So in what way do those types of caricatures and that sort of language hamper our ability to have real conversation about poverty in this country?
Wait, I didn't understand the last part of that. What people are using the stereotype. How can you have the conversation when they're full of stereotypes and prejudice?
Right. As opposed to having a real conversation about poverty and the extent of poverty in this country and who's poor and who's not poor and things like that.
Well, this is not maybe a very moderate or responsible answer, but well, it is. I mean, what do you do when you're talking to some white people and they start expressing really racist sentiments? What happens if you're around a group of men and women and the men start really sexist put-downs of women? I personally get mad. I don't just sit there. I'm going to say something. And I feel the same way about class prejudice. When you decide a whole class of people who are the least fortunate are, parasites and scum and all those sorts of things, I'm not going to be in the mood for a very serious conversation. I'm going to say, do not talk that way in front of me. I'm sorry, we have to take on class prejudice in the same way we face misogyny, racial prejudice, homophobia. It's something that has to stop.
I think a lot of college students in the room can connect with me that some of the best quote-unquote internships or jobs for us are unpaid because we're being trained and we're learning. And I was just wondering, a lot of them actually require that you are able to get credit for it so they can not pay you. They think it's more legal or something. So I was just wondering, do you think that we're being taken advantage of, and if there's any solution for us?
Well, internships. This is a very big problem. It's very good of you to raise it. You probably know there was a book published last year called Intern Nation about the exploitation of young people as interns. It's free labor. And, it means that one of the things that bothers me most about it, and there are many things to bother me about it, is that it means if you want to, say, be a journalist, which might involve interning at a magazine or newspaper for free or a TV station, you have to have rich parents, which means we shrink the population that we're drawing on to get our news to those people who have already a history of some sort of affluence and privilege in their families. But I think that, this is a big issue. You can't do it. I also want to say that there are other forms of very low-paid labor by highly educated people. Any adjunct faculty members here? I don't know. If you're a student and you have an adjunct faculty member, do me a favor, and when she says it gives a good lecture, give her a tip. They don't get paid. Graduate students. What about graduate teaching assistants? Any graduate student teaching assistants here? Yeah. They're trying to organize a union. They're trying to build a union on this campus. They have, okay. I mean, they're trying to strengthen and enlarge the union on this campus, which is wonderful. But I mean, we have seen again and again, I've seen it in my occupation, journalists, highly skilled, educated people who are being offered virtually nothing for their work. And we can't let them roll all over us.
Hi, I want to make a comment about how people can contribute to the homeless and people who are less fortunate than you. There are places in the community that you can contribute donations, like the food bank and crisis center. There's also the Crowded Closet, which is a used clothing store, and there, all their proceeds, it's a Mennonite foundation, all their proceeds go to help people in other countries, people in our country who need help. There's also another way. I'll give an explanation about what happened to me. 5.5 years ago, I was homeless and jobless, staying at a homeless shelter in Iowa City. And I got the idea to go to San Francisco. I heard that was a very place that was friendly to people who were homeless. There were supports there. And so I took my 2 suitcases and got on a train and went there. I did not have very much luck. But as I got off the bus and it was 9 o'clock at night, I was walking with my 2 suitcases to the facility that I found that would help me stay the night. And someone stopped in his car and he walked out and held a bag and he gave me a bag. And he said, "I just want you to have this. I'm a Christian." He was a young man, about 25. And he said, "I just do this on my own to help support people." In the bag were 2 clean socks, a stocking cap, and 2 gift cards for a local supermarket. Each had $15 on them. So there are ways that you can contribute. If you think people are going to spend money on alcohol, you really can't control what they do. You can give them money, you can give the gift cards, you can give a Subway gift card. But if you want to contribute and you have a way, just think about how you can contribute through your own generosity, and a way will come to you. You can't prevent people from abusing themselves or feeling sorry for themselves and trying to find a way to cope, whatever coping mechanism that is, whether it's overeating or drinking or abusing prescription drugs. But anyway, I just want to make that comment, thank you for bringing this to
So are
light.
you a student now?
No, I'm working in the community.
Okay, so anyway, thank you for sharing that, for letting us see that one of the kinds of faces of homelessness are people who have been homeless in this country. I just want to go a little further than you on one point, though, and that is, and I don't care how you're going to disagree with me, but I don't think it's any of your damn business if you give $1 to someone and they want to spend it on booze or cigarettes. I'm sorry, it's not. I mean, yeah, I think that the real moral issue in that exchange is that you have the money, I mean, if you have the money, and if you could get through the day or the month without it by sharing some of it, that's the moral issue. As I said, I'm not religious, but I think, Jesus didn't say, if somebody asks you for something, check out, do a means test, check out, what are his resources really? What bad habits does he have? No, it said, give him his coat and and your cloak. Give him your coat and your cloak. Now, I don't know what the difference between a coat and a cloak was then, but this is really saying, just give it up to those in need. It's not up to you to supervise that person's personal habits. And I think we need a little more of that spirit, which is ultimately a spirit of solidarity, of saying, we're in this together. You're in a bad spot right now. I can help. I'm proud to do so. I guess we should, no, there's a person. Oh, that's it, okay.